A homeless veteran inherited a sealed military bunker from the grandfather he barely knew. But what he found inside wasn't just a relic of the Cold War. It was a choice that would redefine his life forever. If you've ever felt lost, like the world has forgotten you, I think this story might speak to you. Stick around and maybe consider subscribing because we talk about real second chances here. The call came on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was shelter laundry day, and the smell of industrial bleach was so thick it felt like a physical wall. I was sitting on a plastic chair that stuck to the back of my legs, watching my last clean pair of socks tumble behind the smudged glass of a machine that sounded like it was chewing on gravel. My phone, a cheap burner with a cracked screen, buzzed against the linoleum floor where I'd propped it. The number was from a place I'd never heard of, a small town in Wyoming. I almost didn't answer. In my world, unknown numbers were usually a mistake or a debt collector who'd gotten creative, but something made me swipe the screen. "Is this Leo Miller?" The voice was a woman's, crisp and professional, like the snap of a freshly ironed shirt. "Who's asking?" I said, my own voice rough from disuse. "My name is Catherine Albright. I am an attorney in Covenant, Wyoming. I'm calling regarding the estate of your grandfather, Sergeant Major Thomas Miller." The name hit me like a phantom limb, an ache for something that was barely there to begin with. Sergeant Major Thomas Miller. I'd met him twice. Once when I was 5, a towering figure in a dress uniform who smelled of starch and Old Spice and didn't know how to hold a child. The second time was at my mother's funeral, a brief, grim nod across a patch of unnaturally green grass. He'd sent a birthday card with a $20 bill inside it every year until I was 18, and then they just stopped. I'd joined the army a year later, maybe chasing the ghost of a man I thought might understand that part of me. He never wrote. He never called. He died 4 months before I was discharged, a fact I learned from a distant cousin's social media post. "I don't think there's any estate to talk about," I told her, watching my socks spin. We weren't close. "That may be," she said, her tone unruffled. "Nevertheless, he named you as his sole heir. He was quite specific about it. The will is ironclad." I almost laughed. Heir to what? A collection of medals? A folded flag in a triangle box? I had one of those of my own, and it didn't keep you warm at night. "Look, Ms. Albright, I appreciate the call, but I'm not in a position to deal with—" I trailed off. What was I going to say? "I'm not in a position to deal with anything that costs money or requires a fixed address." "There are no outstanding debts, Mr. Miller. The estate is solvent. It consists of a single parcel of land, approximately 40 acres, and a structure on that land. He also left a small cash bequest to cover travel and initial expenses. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to get you here." There was a pause. "There is, however, another matter, a significant one. A development firm, Westward Horizons, has made a substantial offer for the property, a very substantial offer. That got my attention. Money was a language I understood, mostly through its absence. How substantial? $600,000, she said, and the number hung in the air, so alien in that bleak, bleach-scented room. It sounded like a typo. "For 40 acres of dirt in the middle of nowhere?" I asked, my skepticism a reflex. "The land itself isn't the primary interest," she explained patiently. "It has certain geological properties. They want to build a high-end, off-grid resort. The offer is conditional on the land being delivered vacant. That means the structure on the property would need to be demolished. They've included the cost of demolition in their offer." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray city street. $600,000. It was an impossible number, a get-out-of-jail-free card for a life I'd screwed up. It was 4 walls, a roof, a real bed. It was the end of looking over my shoulder, of wondering where the next meal would come from. It was an erasure of the last 2 years. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "You need to come to Covenant. Sign the probate documents, and then sign the purchase agreement."
My fee is covered by the estate. You would walk away with the balance. But Mr. Miller, your grandfather's will has a stipulation, a peculiar one. He requires that you personally inspect the property before making any decision to sell. He was very clear on that point. You have to see it with your own eyes. A condition. Of course, there was a condition. Nothing was ever simple.
The old man was reaching out from the grave to make me jump through one last hoop. Fine, I said, the word tasting like rust. Fine. How do I get there? Ms. Albright gave me the details for a wire transfer. It was $3,000. More money than I'd held at one time since I'd been discharged. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, the phone warm in my hand. The laundry machine had stopped its churning. My socks sat in a damp pile behind the glass. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't just the dull hum of survival. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was just a question mark. A 40-acre question mark in the middle of Wyoming. The bus ride was 3 days of stale air and the low drone of tires on asphalt. I watched America slide past the greasy window, a blur of strip malls giving way to endless fields of corn, then to the vast, open plains that seemed to swallow the sky. I kept to myself, my duffel bag with its few possessions tucked between my feet, my head resting against the vibrating glass. The money from Ms. Albright was a small, tight roll in my pocket, a secret heat against my leg. I spent as little of it as possible, buying coffee and day-old sandwiches at desolate bus stations in the middle of the night. The rest of the time, I chewed on the facts. A grandfather I didn't know. A piece of land I'd never seen. A sum of money that could change everything. And a strange, final request. You have to see it. Sleep came in jagged pieces, filled with dreams of sand and shouting, the familiar ghosts that followed me from my time overseas. I'd wake up with my heart hammering against my ribs, the faces of the other passengers swimming in the dim light of the bus, their expressions placid, unknowing. They were all going somewhere, home, to a job, to family. I was going to a lawyer's office in a town called Covenant to sign a piece of paper that would trade a dead man's legacy for a new life. It felt like a clean, simple transaction. A deal. And I was good at following orders. When I finally stepped off the bus in Covenant, the air was so clean and cold it felt like a slap. The town was small, a single main street nestled in a valley with jagged, snow-dusted mountains rising up on all sides. It was the kind of quiet that felt loud after the constant noise of the city. Ms. Albright's office was in a small brick building with a faded gold leaf sign that read, Albright & Son, Attorneys at Law. There was no son in sight, just a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked me over, my worn boots and military surplus jacket, but her expression didn't change. Mr. Miller, she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Her office was filled with books, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with thick legal volumes that smelled of old paper and leather. It was a room that felt solid, permanent. She sat behind a large oak desk and folded her hands. The paperwork is ready for your signature, she began, getting straight to the point. Probate is straightforward. As for the offer from Westward Horizons, it's a strong one. I've reviewed it thoroughly. They're eager to close. Once you sign, the funds would be in your account within 30 days. She slid a thick folder across the desk. But first, there's the matter of the stipulation. She pulled a single, smaller envelope from a drawer. It was sealed with wax, a deep burgundy red, stamped with a simple letter M. Your grandfather left this for you, along with a key. He instructed me to give them to you only when you arrived here, in person. She pushed the envelope and a heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key across the desk. The key was iron, pitted with age. The envelope was thick, my name written on it in a strong, slanted hand. Thomas Miller's hand. "The property is about 15 miles out of town," she said, her voice softening slightly. "It's remote. There's a dirt road, but it can be rough. I've taken the liberty of renting a vehicle for you for a few days. It's included in the estate expenses. A sturdy truck. The keys are at the front desk." She looked at me, a direct, searching gaze. "Your grandfather was a client of my father's, and then mine, for over 40 years. He was a very deliberate man, Mr. Miller. He never did anything without a reason. I would urge you to take this part of his request as seriously as he did." I picked up the key. It was heavy in my palm, the metal cold against my skin. $600,000 was waiting on the other side of this. All I had to do was take a drive, look at some concrete structure, and come back. A final salute to a man I never knew. "I'll go out there this afternoon," I said, my voice flat. I tucked the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket, the corner of it pressing against my ribs. "Very good," she said, her professional mask back in place. "Let me know what you decide." The truck was an old Ford, beaten up but solid, with a heater that worked and a full tank of gas. I bought a map at the gas station, along with a thermos of coffee and a bag of jerky. The girl at the counter gave me a curious look. Strangers probably stood out in a town this small. The route Ms. Albright had marked was simple enough. I drove out of Covenant, leaving the small cluster of civilization behind, and headed into the high plains. The landscape was stark and beautiful, a vast expanse of sagebrush and dry grass under a sky so big it felt like it could crush you. The mountains loomed in the distance, a constant, silent presence. After about 10 miles, the paved road gave way to a gravel one, and then, just as the map indicated, a smaller, unmarked dirt track veered off to the right. The truck bucked and rattled over the uneven ground. There were no fences, no signs of life, just the wind whipping across the empty land. I drove for what felt like an hour, the sun starting to dip towards the jagged peaks of the mountains. I was beginning to think I'd missed it when I saw it. It wasn't a building, not really. It was a mound. A low, grass-covered hill that rose unnaturally from the flat terrain. As I got closer, I saw the concrete. A huge, gray, windowless wall of it, set into the side of the man-made hill. And in the center of the wall was a door. It was a slab of thick steel, painted olive drab, with a large wheel in the center, like something you'd see on a submarine or a bank vault. This was the structure. It wasn't a shed or a cabin. It was a bunker. I parked the truck and got out. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the dry grass. I walked up to the door. It was immense, intimidating. The paint was peeling, revealing patches of rust underneath, but it looked as solid as the mountain behind it. To the side of the door was a heavy steel plate, and beneath it, a keyhole. It was an old, industrial lock, the kind that looked like it would need a key the size of my hand. I pulled the iron key from my pocket. It fit. I put the key in the lock. It was stiff, and I had to put my shoulder into it to get it to turn. There was a deep, grinding thud from inside the door, like a series of heavy bolts retracting. Then, silence. I grabbed the wheel in the center of the door and pulled. Nothing. I braced my feet and pulled with all my weight. The wheel groaned, resisting, then began to turn, slowly, with agonizing effort. Each turn was a battle against rust and time. My muscles screamed in protest. I was sweating, despite the cold air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it would turn no more. I put my hands on the edge of the door and pushed. With a deep, resonant groan that seemed to come from the center of the earth, the massive steel door began to swing inward. opening a sliver of perfect, complete darkness. The air that flowed out was cold and sterile, smelling of dust, concrete, and something else. Something that reminded me of old, forgotten places. It smelled like time itself. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the inspection. I went back to the truck and grabbed a heavy flashlight I'd bought at the gas station. Taking a deep breath, I stepped across the threshold, leaving the fading light of the afternoon behind, and entered the darkness. The beam from my flashlight cut a sharp white cone through the black. I was in a short, narrow hallway, also made of concrete. The walls were bare, the floor was smooth. At the end of the hallway was another steel door, this one smaller, a standard size but just as thick. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was larger than I expected, maybe 20 by 20 feet. The air was still and cold. My light swept across the space, revealing a scene frozen in time. There was a simple, metal-framed cot against one wall, a thin mattress on it with a neatly folded wool blanket. In the center of the room was a heavy wooden desk and a chair. On the desk sat an old manual typewriter, a gooseneck lamp, and a single framed photograph. Along the far wall were shelves, neatly stacked with canned goods, boxes of matches, first aid kits, and water jugs. It was a Cold War survival bunker, perfectly preserved. A tomb for a world that never ended. I walked over to the desk. The photograph was of a young woman with a sad smile, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. My mother. And me. I'd never seen the picture before. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up. This whole place. This was all for us? The idea seemed insane. My grandfather, the distant, silent man, had built a fallout shelter for a daughter and grandson he barely saw. My light fell on something else on the desk. A metal footlocker, the kind I knew well from my own time in the service. It was sitting on the floor, next to the desk chair. It wasn't locked. I knelt down and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, on top of a stack of what looked like old military records, was the envelope. The one Ms. Albright had given me, the one with the wax seal. I had put it in my jacket, but this was a different one. It was identical. My name, Leo Miller, was written across the front in the same strong, slanted script. My breath caught in my throat. He'd left one with the lawyer and one here. A backup. To make sure I got the message. I sat down in the cold, hard chair, the beam of my flashlight propped up to illuminate the room. I broke the wax seal with my thumb and pulled out the folded pages within. The paper was thick, creamy, and covered in that same confident handwriting. I began to read. Leo, it started. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have made it to this place. I imagine you have a great many questions. I also imagine you have an offer in your pocket from some developer who wants to pave over this land and build something shiny and new. I want you to listen to me before you sign their papers. I want you to understand what this place is and why it exists. It is not what it appears to be. I paused, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The silence of the bunker was profound, a weight in my ears. I could hear my own heartbeat. I continued reading. I was not a good father to your mother, and I was no grandfather to you. I know this. It is the great regret of my life. After the war, the one in the jungle, I came back. Different. The world didn't make sense. The noise, the people, the expectations. I couldn't connect. I saw danger everywhere, threats in every shadow. So I came out here. I bought this land because it was far away from everything and everyone. And I built this place with my own 2 hands. Poured the concrete, welded the steel. The world thought I was a crazy old coot, a doomsday prepper waiting for the bomb to drop. I let them think it. A good cover story is the best camouflage. This bunker was never about the bomb, son. It was about having one place in the world that was safe. Absolutely, unequivocally safe. But it wasn't for me. It was for your mother. She was a gentle soul in a hard world, and I didn't know how to protect her. I tried to give her what I thought she needed: money, a good education. But I didn't know how to give her what she really needed, which was a father. When you were born, I thought I'd have a second chance. But I looked at you, this tiny, perfect thing, and I was terrified. I was afraid I would break you, the same way I had broken everything else I touched. So I kept my distance. I told myself it was for your own good. It was a lie. It was cowardice, plain and simple. But I never stopped watching. I never stopped trying to protect you from afar. This place was my promise. A promise that no matter what happened in the world, no matter how bad things got, there would be a sanctuary for you and her. A place to fall back to. A place to start over. When your mother died, I nearly lost my mind. I failed her. The one person I was supposed to protect, and I failed. That's when my promise shifted entirely to you. I know about your service, Leo. I have my ways. I know it was hard. I know you carry things with you, things that people who haven't been there can't possibly understand. I carry them too. They are heavy ghosts. Sometimes they make you feel like you don't belong anywhere. That's why this place is so important. Now, about that developer's offer. It's a lot of money. I know that. And I will not command you from the grave. The choice is yours. If you take that money, you can buy yourself a new life, a comfortable one. I wouldn't blame you if you did. After what you've been through, you've earned some comfort. But I am asking you to consider what you would be selling. You wouldn't just be selling 40 acres of dirt. You would be selling this promise, this sanctuary. There is more to this place than meets the eye. Look deeper. The floor under the desk, the north wall, third panel from the corner. Your training taught you to be observant. Use it. What you find will explain the rest. It will explain the real purpose of this bunker and the real inheritance I am leaving you. It's not land or money. It's a choice, a purpose. Whatever you decide, know this. I was proud of you. I am proud of you. Always. Your grandfather, Thomas Miller. I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred through a film of tears I didn't realize I was shedding. The cold of the bunker seemed to seep into my bones, but it was matched by a strange warmth spreading through my chest. He saw me. The silent, distant man I thought had forgotten I existed. He saw me all along. He knew. He understood. I cried for the grandfather I never had, for the years we'd lost. I cried for the young, scared soldier I had been, and the lost man I had become. And I cried for the sheer, unexpected grace of this moment, of being found in a place where I thought I was completely alone. The flashlight beam was starting to dim. I wiped my eyes on the sleeve of my jacket and stood up. My body felt stiff, my mind reeling. The developer's offer, the $600,000, felt like a dirty word. It was a bribe to extinguish this place, this memory, this one tangible connection to a man I was just beginning to meet. The floor, under the desk, I whispered to myself, the words sounding loud in the stillness. I moved the heavy desk chair and the footlocker. I ran my hands over the smooth, cold concrete. Nothing. I knocked on it. It was solid all the way across. I thought back to the letter. Your training taught you to be observant. I got down on my hands and knees, my face inches from the floor. I looked at the dust patterns, the faint scuffs. And then I saw it. A very faint, almost invisible hairline crack forming a perfect square, about 3 feet by 3 feet. It was masterful work. You would never find it unless you knew exactly where to look. There was no handle, no lip to pull on. I remembered the other instruction. The north wall, third panel from the corner. I went to the wall with the shelves. The wall wasn't concrete here. It was lined with what looked like steel panels, probably for reinforcement. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. The third panel looked identical to the others. I pushed on it. Nothing. I ran my hands along the edges, feeling for a seam, a button, a hidden latch. Nothing. I was about to give up when my fingers brushed against a small, almost microscopic irregularity in the cold steel. It was a tiny hole, no bigger than a pinprick. I thought for a moment, what would fit in there? My mind raced. A key? No, too big. A wire? I searched my pockets, nothing. Then I thought about the desk. I went back and looked at the old typewriter. Its keys were attached to long metal arms. I gently worked one of them loose. It was a thin, stiff piece of metal. I took it back to the panel and inserted the tip into the tiny hole. It slid in about an inch, and then I felt a faint click. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard a low hiss, like the release of a pneumatic seal. I looked down at the floor. The square section of concrete under where the desk had been was rising silently, lifting up like a platform. It rose about 2 feet, and then stopped, revealing a dark, hollow space beneath. A hidden compartment. My heart was hammering. I aimed the weakening beam of the flashlight into the opening. The space below was lined with metal, and it was filled with more footlockers. 4 of them, stacked 2 by 2. They were standard issue, olive drab, just like the one upstairs, but these were sealed with heavy-duty padlocks. As the hydraulic platform hissed to a stop, I noticed something else. Taped to the side of the top locker was a small, flat metal box. I reached down and pulled it free. It was a key box, and inside were 4 identical keys, each with a tag. The tags were numbered 1 through 4. This was it, the real inheritance. I sat on the edge of the raised platform, my legs dangling in the hidden space, and I felt a wave of dizziness. It was all too much. The bunker, the letter, the secret compartment. It felt like I'd fallen into someone else's life. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where the world you thought you knew just peels back and you see the complex machinery working underneath. It's terrifying, and it's thrilling. It's the kind of moment that changes you, whether you want it to or not. If you've been through something similar, if you've ever discovered a secret that changed your family or your life forever, I want you to know you're not alone. Share a piece of your story in the comments if you feel comfortable. This community is a place for stories like that, for people who have had to navigate the unexpected twists of life. We see you. I took a deep breath of the cold, still air. I had a choice to make, but my grandfather was wrong about one thing. It didn't feel like a choice anymore. Not really. I knew I couldn't sell this place. I couldn't let a bulldozer erase this story. I had to know what was in those lockers. I had to see this through to the end. I had to understand the purpose he'd left for me. My flashlight finally died, plunging me into absolute, impenetrable blackness. I wasn't scared. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I sat there in the dark, in the silence, and I waited for the dawn. I must have fallen asleep, slumped against the wall, because the next thing I knew, a thin line of gray light was visible under the main bunker door. Morning. My body ached, a deep, cold ache from sleeping on the concrete. I felt my way out of the bunker and into the pale, early light. The sky was a soft canvas of pink and orange, and the air was so crisp it hurt to breathe. The world felt new. I felt new. I drove back to town with a singular focus. At a hardware store that smelled of sawdust and oil, I bought a new heavy-duty flashlight, extra batteries, a crowbar, and a bolt cutter, just in case. I also bought a bag of groceries, bread, cheese, coffee, a small camping stove. I was going back, and I wasn't leaving until I had answers. When I got back to the bunker, I left the huge steel door open a few inches. letting a shaft of daylight pierce the darkness. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the oppressive black at bay. I descended into the hidden compartment and got to work. The keys in the metal box worked perfectly. I opened the first locker. It was full of cash, neatly bundled stacks of $100 bills. I didn't count it, but it was a staggering amount. More money than I had ever seen. Tucked on top of the money was another letter, a short one this time. "Leo," it read. "This is the seed. It is not a prize, it is a tool. Use it to pay the taxes on this land for the next 100 years. Use it to buy supplies. Use it to live, so you don't have to worry about money while you do the real work. But do not waste it. Every dollar in here was earned with sweat and saved with sacrifice. It is meant to fuel a mission, not a vacation." The rest of the lockers will explain that mission. I carefully closed the first locker, my mind numb. The seed, a tool. My grandfather had been planning this for decades, socking away money, preparing for a future he wouldn't see. I moved to the second locker. I unlocked it, the click of the padlock echoing in the small space, and lifted the lid. This one wasn't filled with money. It was filled with files. Dozens and dozens of manila folders, each with a name neatly typed on the tab. I picked one up at random. Sophia Reed, it read. Inside was a collection of documents, a birth certificate, a passport application, denied. Newspaper clippings about political unrest in a small Eastern European country. Letters written in a language I didn't recognize, and English translations of them. And a final, single sheet of paper. A handwritten ledger detailing expenses. Bus ticket, $180. Food and lodging, 2 weeks, $450. Legal consultation, $500. New identity documents, discreet source, $2,500. At the bottom was a note. Settled in Oregon, working as a seamstress. Safe. I picked up another file. Javier Morales. Inside was a similar story. A journalist fleeing a cartel in Mexico. Death threats. A desperate plea for help. And another ledger of expenses. A final note. Working on a ranch in Montana. Family is with him. Safe. I sat there for hours, going through the files. There were over 50 of them. Men, women, families, people from all over the world, all fleeing something terrible. Dictators, warlords, criminal gangs, unjust persecution. They were all people who had fallen through the cracks of the official systems, people with nowhere else to turn. And somehow, they had found their way to Sergeant Major Thomas Miller, my grandfather, the crazy old doomsday prepper. It wasn't a cover story. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. While the world thought he was preparing for a nuclear apocalypse, he was running a modern-day underground railroad. This bunker wasn't a fallout shelter. It was a way station, a safe house. The last stop for desperate people before they were given a new life, a second chance, funded by this quiet, solitary man. The canned goods, the cot, the medical supplies, it all made sense now. It was never for him, it was for them. I opened the third locker. It was filled with equipment. A high-frequency radio set, laptops, all older models but still functional. Several burner phones, still in their boxes. GPS trackers. A small, portable printer for making documents. It was a spy's toolkit. He wasn't just giving them money, he was giving them a whole new existence, crafted with meticulous, paranoid detail. The same skills that had kept him alive in the jungle, he had repurposed them to save others. Finally, I opened the fourth locker. Inside was a single, thick, leather-bound ledger, and one last letter. Leo, it began. Now you know. This is the work. It is dangerous, it is thankless, and it is necessary. I started it after I got back. I saw a man I'd served with, a South Vietnamese interpreter, abandoned by our government and targeted by the new regime. I couldn't let that happen. I owed him. So I got him out. I got his family out. And once I knew how to do it, I couldn't stop. I found others, people with no one in their corner. The ledger contains all my contacts, the reliable ones and the ones to avoid. It has the routes, the methods, the codes, everything you need to know. I am leaving this to you not as a burden, but as an offer, a chance to have a purpose that matters. I saw the way you were drifting, son. I saw it because I was the same. The service gives you a mission, a tribe, a reason to get up in the morning. And then it ends, and the silence that follows can be deafening. You can feel like a weapon with no war, a tool with no purpose. This is a new war, a quiet one. It's a war against despair. You don't have to do this. There is no shame in taking the money from the first locker and walking away. You can go live a good, quiet life. You've earned it. But I think you're like me. I think you need a mission. I think you need to know that you can still make a difference, that your skills can be used for something other than destruction. That developer will keep trying to buy this land. They won't give up easily. They represent the world that wants to pave over everything, to make it all smooth and easy and profitable. This place is the opposite of that. It's hard, it's hidden, and it's about something more than money. The choice is yours, Leo. A quiet life or the work. I hope you choose the work. The world needs more quiet men who are willing to do hard things for no other reason than that they are the right things to do. I have faith in you. I always have. I closed the ledger. The weight of it in my lap felt immense. This was my inheritance. Not the land, not the money, not the bunker itself. It was this. A legacy of courage and compassion disguised as paranoia. A secret war against the darkness, fought by a man the world had written off as a hermit. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Ms. Albright. "Leo," she said, her voice all business. "I've just received a revised offer from Westward Horizons. They're getting impatient. They've increased it. Substantially." "How much?" I asked, looking around the small, concrete room that now felt more like a command center than a tomb. $1 million, she said, and it expires in 24 hours. They want a final answer. What should I tell them? I looked at the files stacked on the desk, the faces of the people he had saved. I looked at the ledger, the book that held the keys to saving more. $1 million. It was the easy way out. A life of comfort, with no risks and no responsibilities. It was everything I thought I wanted 2 days ago, but it felt like ashes in my mouth now. My grandfather was right. I was a tool without a purpose, a soldier without a war. He had just handed me one. "Tell them no," I said, and my voice was steady, clearer than it had been in years. "Tell them the property is not for sale. Not now, not ever." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Ms. Albright processing this. The homeless kid turning down $1 million. "All right, Leo," she said finally, and for the first time, I heard a note of genuine warmth, of approval in her voice. "I'll let them know. Is there anything else you need?" "Yes," I said. "Can you recommend a good tax attorney? And someone who knows about setting up a nonprofit trust? I have some work to do." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. I used some of the seed money to hire Ms. Albright and her recommended team. We legally fortified the property, placing it in a trust that could never be sold to a developer. We paid the property taxes for the next century. I spent my days cleaning and organizing the bunker, taking inventory, and studying my grandfather's ledger. I learned his codes, his methods, his network of quiet helpers scattered across the globe. I used the old radio, and after a week of trying, I made contact. An old friend of my grandfather's, a retired cryptographer living in Arizona. I used the code phrase from the ledger. His voice was wary at first, but when I identified myself, he opened up. He told me stories about my grandfather, about the risks he took, the lives he saved. He told me the network had gone dormant since Thomas's death, but that the need was greater than ever. He vetted me, asking questions only the true heir would know. I passed. And then he said the words that changed my life for a second time. We have a family, a mother and 2 small children. They're in danger. Can you help? I thought of the empty cot. I thought of my grandfather's letter, of his faith in me. I thought of the promise he had made to the world, a promise I now held in my hands. Yes, I said, I can help. Tell me what you need. That was 6 months ago. The bunker is my home now. It's no longer cold and silent. It's a place of purpose. The equipment is updated. The systems are online. I've learned how to move money discreetly, how to arrange transport, how to create cover stories that hold up. I'm not my grandfather. I don't have his decades of experience. I make mistakes, but I'm learning. The family, the mother and her 2 children, they made it. They're safe now, starting a new life in Canada. There have been others since. A teacher, a doctor, a young man who spoke out against a corrupt official. The work is hard, and it's lonely. Most days, I'm the only person for 20 miles. But I'm not alone. I have the ghosts of the people my grandfather saved, and the hope of the ones I have yet to help. I never thought of myself as a good man. The army trains you to be a good soldier, which is a different thing entirely. But out here, in the quiet heart of Wyoming, I'm trying to be both. I'm trying to honor the legacy of the man I wish I'd known, a man who built a fortress not to keep the world out, but to bring the worthy in. Inheritance isn't about what you're given. It's about what you choose to do with it. My grandfather left me a parcel of land and a pile of secrets. He left me a choice between a comfortable life and a meaningful one. I chose meaning, and that has made all the difference. This journey taught me that home isn't a place with 4 walls and a roof. It's a purpose that anchors you to the world. It's a promise you keep, not just to others, but to yourself. It's the quiet satisfaction of doing a hard thing because it's the right thing. If this story has meant anything to you, if it's made you think about your own legacy, about the quiet wars worth fighting, then I'd ask you to subscribe and join our community. Because these are the stories that need to be told. These are the inheritances that truly matter. Share your own story below. Tell me about a time you chose the harder path, the one with more meaning. I'll be reading. You're not alone in this. We're in this together.